my name is Ketevan. Welcome back to my channel. I want to talk today about the books that I have read in my childhood that I actually want to reread for a variety of reasons. Some of them a very wide variety. So the first little section I have is the 4 books that I remember loving, but I want to kind of see if they hold up. So the first one is Enchanted. I would have to say, this one is by Gail, Carson, Levine. I would have to say that this is definitely like probably the book I've read the most. I wasn't a big rereader even as a kid, and I'm not today certainly. So I read this one though at least 10 times, and it's basically a retelling of Cinderella, and I know that my copy has like a chunk missing out of it. I don't have it with me, it's back in the US in storage, but I definitely want to reread it just to see if I still would love it. We'll see. The next one is A Patch of Blue by Elizabeth Kata, I think is how you say her last name. And I remember reading this probably, how old would I have been living there? Probably like 11 years old. And I remember like going to the librarian for a recommendation, or maybe my mom forced me to go to the librarian for a recommendation because my mom's like, I don't know, you've read so much. Like, and I remember the librarian giving it to me and telling me that it was actually out of print. So A Patch of Blue, I think it was made into a movie with I don't remember his name, but he's a very famous actor, and it's basically the story of this like white girl who's very much abused by her mother and maybe another family member that lives with them. She's actually been blinded by them, by their neglect, abuse, etc. And she's out in public. It's set in, I believe, the 50s or something like that, like definitely pre-civil rights era. And she's sitting in the sun, and she just happens to start talking to this man, and she doesn't realize until much later that he's actually black, and they sort of, I don't know, do they fall in love? I don't know. It's been so long since I read the book, but basically their relationship is frowned upon, and I don't exactly remember the ending, but I just remember like loving it, and I just want to see if it holds up. Like if it was out of print 20 years ago, maybe not, but who knows? We'll see if I can even get my hands on a copy. The next one is Catcher in the Rye by J.D. Salinger. I see this discussed so much in any bookish like community. People hate it, people love it. When I was a teenager, I loved it, but I've read that only teenagers can really love it, so I want to read it as an adult and sort of see what I think about it. I feel like I've also grown in my feminism, so maybe that might make me not enjoy it as much, because I know the protagonist, Holden Caulfield, does not, I remember him not treating women well in the book, but you know, when you're like a young teenage girl, that doesn't bother you as much, or at least it didn't bother me until I grew as a feminist. Alrighty, and the next book I read, it was technically for school, but I was out sick for a long time, and so I read this on my own, and I think I just wrote a paper about it. Like I didn't have any class discussion or lectures about it. So A Separate Piece by John Knowles. I read it like on my own and I loved it. I don't remember why I loved it. I think the reason I loved it would be a spoiler, so I won't share that, but but basically it moved me, right? And later everything else I've read about it is basically kind of knocking on it as like a glorification of privilege. And yeah, they're in like private boarding school, but I mean, lots of books are like that, so I don't know. I want to just like see how it holds up. I don't know. So those are the ones that I loved, and I want to kind of reread just to see if I still would love them. And the next set of books, there's 3 of them, are books that I know I loved, and I know that they're problematic. So I want to reread them. I mean, I'm sure I will still enjoy them just because I knew they were problematic even when I was reading them, but I still kind of was like, it's a fun book, whatever. So the first one was Tarzan of the Apes by Edgar Rice Burroughs. I didn't read it as much as Enchanted, but I definitely have read it like at least 3 times, but all when I was like less than 15 years old. So I have no idea how I would appreciate the writing style nowadays. Obviously it's problematic because it's basically, you know, an allegory for colonization, and obviously the black people like in the Congo where the book is set, they are depicted as savages, like blah, blah, blah. All that is like very problematic. Still loved it. So now I want to reread it just to see if I can still enjoy it knowing it's problematic. I knew it was problematic then. I don't know. We'll see. Next up is Cheaper by the Dozen by Frank B. Gilbreth Jr. You might be more familiar with this story because it was made into a movie starring Steve Martin and Bonnie Hunt, is that her name? The movie was updated for modern audiences, let's just say that. Obviously, like, this book was written, I think, in like the 30s, like a very long time ago. And, you know, the mom does not have a job, I think. It's very like sexist gender roles, things like that. So I remember enjoying it, but I'm pretty sure I knew like, this is not how I want to be treated. So I want to reread it just to dig in and see the comparison of today's story versus the actual book, the source material. Next up is Daddy Longlegs by Jean Webster. I actually have, I'm not going to dig it out, I'm sorry, but I have this very old copy of it that I actually found in Paris. It's very, very old. I got it just because I was like, I love this book, even though I knew it was terrible as I was reading it. So Daddy Longlegs is the story of an orphan who just mysteriously gets this benefactor one day, and I think he pays for her to go to school and do all these like nice things that she otherwise wouldn't be able to do, and she doesn't know who he is, so she just writes him letters and she calls him Daddy Longlegs because she kind of saw him once and he was like very tall and had long legs. So she writes him all these letters and he never writes back, but he just keeps paying for everything. And then somehow something happens and then they get married. And I remember being like, wow, this is really fucked up, but also I love it. So I don't remember like exactly how they went from like man paying for orphan to like man makes orphan his wife. But there was something in there that like didn't turn me off completely, and I want to be able to remember what that was. So, and now I have 6 books from high school that I have various feelings about. 2 were I loved and I want to reread them because I know I will love them again. 2 are that I just didn't remember anything about my feelings about the book. Like, I remember the book, but I don't remember feeling one way or another about it. And then the third group is books that I know I hated and I'm pretty sure I should give it a second chance. Just because like maybe I was forced to read it and that's why I didn't like it. We'll see. So the 2 that I loved were Their Eyes Were Watching God, Zora Neale Hurston. This one's a classic. It's, you know, fantastic. It's the story of a woman who I think leaves, is it the first person she leaves her husband, and then she has a string of different men that she meets, and I just remember like it being fantastic. I'm not doing it justice because I didn't, because I don't remember the plot too much, but I just remember feeling like, wow, this is a great book as I read it. And then the other one was The Awakening by Kate Chopin. Is that, she's American, so do you say Chopin or is it Chopin? I actually don't know. But anyway, this was like one of the first like feminist novels, and she's basically a mom and a wife, and she's like miserably unhappy. And is it a spoiler to say what happens in the end? I don't know. I won't say it just in case, but I just remember being like, this is why we need feminism. I don't know. That just like, it sparked the little feminist in me in high school. So I want to reread that one as well. And then these are the 2 that I feel like neutral about. I don't remember anything about them. The first one is The House on Mango Street by Sandra Cisneros. It's like a coming of age story, and I don't even remember what ethnicity or what nationality she is, but she's a very young Latina girl who something happens to her, and I don't know, that's all I got. Something happens and she's growing up and coming of age and all that good stuff, and I don't remember not liking it, but I don't remember loving it either, and it's supposed to be like an amazing classic, so I just want to give it another shot. And then the other one is The Scarlet Letter, Nathanial Hawthorne. This one I do remember kind of hating Hester Prynne because I thought she wasn't like strong enough. But I know that that's like a very young person's like interpretation of it. And I don't remember hating like the writing necessarily. I just remember like hating that we were giving this world so much presence in our classroom, like, you know, the Christian, like, you know, puritanical like mindset. And I just didn't like talking about it because I was like, yeah, we're moved on. We're over it now. Like, even though we're not, but like, but I don't remember like disliking or liking the book itself. So I want to reread that one. And then these are the 2 that I definitely hated and I want to try to give them another chance. The first one is Heart of Darkness by Joseph Conrad. I mean, obviously Joseph Conrad's Heart of Darkness is super problematic. It's basically like a glorification of colonization, blah, blah, blah. But then I read that Joseph Conrad himself was against colonization. So I was like, maybe I wasn't giving it as close over or mature of as a read as I could have when I was younger. Also, I think it's a terrible book to teach high schoolers, like without the historical context, because like we never, as I recall, and maybe I'm just misremembering, but I do not remember talking about Belgian colonization or colonization in general. I'm sure we must have talked about it, but I'm wondering if it was like a very short lecture and that was like the extent of it. I remember talking about symbolism a lot, and I just was like not here for it. Like it just didn't, the story did not jive with me. But knowing that he himself was kind of like against colonization, it makes me want to reread just to see if maybe I'm missing like the subtext he might have put in there. And the next one is The Old Man and the Sea, Ernest Hemingway. So this one, we read it. It's like very short. I think we read it in like a week or something. And I was just so underwhelmed by it. I was like, it's a man in a boat fishing. Like, I mean, but then he and the whole world consider that his greatest works. And so when I learned that when I was younger, I thought, oh, okay, so Ernest Hemingway is not for me. Like if that's his best work, then like, no. But I don't know. I still want to give it another shot because maybe I missed something. Maybe I just wasn't in the right mood. You know, I think a lot of school assigned books can be like that. If you're not wanting to already read it, being forced to read it can kind of ruin it for you. So I'm just trying to give it a second shot by putting on this list. And then the last three on this list are books that I know for a fact that I was way too young to read. One of them I didn't even finish, and then the other two, I just know that I didn't actually like absorb the full story. So the first one was The Bean Trees by Barbara Kingsolver. And I actually don't really remember what exactly this is about. Again, my mom was like, I don't know what you should read, child. Like, you know, I was like, Mom, what else can I read? What else can I read? She's like, I don't know. So I remember we were in the mall, or maybe she brought us to the mall. You remember Walden Books, if you're American, how there used to be bookstores in the mall? And then of course those went out of business because no one shopped at them. But anyway, so we went to a Walden Books in the mall, and I remember this, like, he looked old, but now as an adult, I realized he was probably like 17. And maybe he was like in college, but still like very young. And my mom was like, she's 12, she reads at high school level, what would you recommend? And he gave us The Bean Trees by Barbara Kingsolver. And I was like, the cover looked really cool. It was like pretty orange. Like it was very graphic. It looked very childlike. So I was like, ooh, cool. And then I was reading it and I was just like, oh, this is scarring me for life. So the basic like premise is that this woman, I don't remember how, but she basically comes across this, like, either she's abandoned or orphaned or something, like toddler. And she decides to raise the toddler as her own. But the toddler, like, has been severely sexually abused. So, like, I don't really remember the rest of the story, probably because that was the scarring thing in my brain. Even as I was reading it, I was like, oh, they shouldn't have let me read this. But I read the whole thing and I liked it, so I just don't remember much about it. The next one I think was probably more age appropriate, even though I remember almost nothing from it, but it's Kidnapped by Robert Louis Stevenson. And this one I read very young. I was probably like maybe 11 or so, yeah, when I read it. And it was like, you know how in some reading classes or like English classes you have like free reading time, and I had like finished my book and didn't have another book, so I went to the teacher and she was like, oh, you're an advanced reader here. And I just remember being like, this is a boy book, but I was like, whatever. I read lots of boy books back then. And I just remember like actively not understanding lots of it. Like, you know how you improve your reading by like skipping over the words you don't know, and then eventually you'll fill it in with context clues and stuff, blah, blah, blah. I think that's what the teacher intended, but I think she like bumped me up like maybe a level too high. So I like read it, but like, I just, I know I didn't absorb it as much as I could have. And then the last one, probably the most inappropriate one for my age at the time. So I actually had to Google this book just to figure out the name of the book because I never actually even finished it because I knew it was inappropriate for me, and I just put it down and was like, no thank you. If you know what it is, you'll be like, but it's A Time to Kill by John Grisham. So if you've read it, you will know exactly why I put it down. And if you don't, it's because it opens with a very, very brutal, graphically descriptive rape scene of a small girl, and it was actually John Grisham's first book. So I don't know I mean, I know how I picked it up. It was like one of my mom's books, and I just like kind of like stole it and started reading it, and then just like put it back and was like, oh. And so I don't think she even knew that I read it, but I got it like maybe halfway through that scene, and I was just like, oh no, not for me, you know. Like, and it was his first book, and I think it got turned into a movie. And from the synopsis I read, it does actually sound kind of interesting. I'd have to probably be in a very specific kind of mood because it's still like a crime, you know, like thriller type thing. It's a John Grisham book. But yeah, I was definitely too young to even pick that up, and I probably wouldn't have any interest in picking it up now, except for the fact that I read that little snippet when I was younger. But if you've read it, let me know. Like, do you think it's worth reading at all, aside from just like entertainment purposes? I don't know, like I've never read a John Grisham book in full, that is. So let me know, like, I don't know, I kind of like, you know, James Patterson, like all those, like, kind of ignore them, but if it's worth it, let me know. I don't know, we'll see. So anyway, that's the last book on this list. Have you read any of them? Also, I want to hear about books that maybe you read when you were way too young, or books that you hated from school that you suspect might have been because you had to read them in school, or books that you read when you were younger and reread them and either hated them or loved them. All that good stuff. Like, I don't know, I just think that like I'm officially at an age where like rereading is like definitely... I think there's value now in rereading stuff because it's been long enough where I genuinely don't remember some of the books that I read like 10, 15 years ago, even as an adult. So I'm starting with more like the childhood ones, and then we'll see if I continue. I don't know. We'll see. But anyway, thanks for watching, and until next time, bye.